Welcome back to the deep dive. You sent us a mountain of material this week, and we are going straight to the summit of complexity.
We really are.
We're wrestling with a source that is so dense, so aggressively verbose, that we needed, I think, a team of cryptographers and a very, very strong cup of coffee just to get through the title.
I think that's fair to say.
The pseudo-paradoxicalizationality of macroscopic muckficentia.
Indeed. And for you, our dedicated listener, we are really focused today on extracting the core insight from what the authors claim is a foundational piece of nonfiction on the artifice of tricknology.
Right. And that specific text is the gallimorphic infinitogram and the contemplation of the incorrigible pig in the box.
That's the one causing all the intellectual tremors.
And if you feel overwhelmed just hearing those phrases, that's okay. You're exactly where the original authors wanted you to be.
Oh, absolutely. They deliberately chose language that was, specialized, intensely high-flown, and sensitive.
It feels like an exclusive club. And our mission here is to sort of dismantle that velvet rope. We want to extract the single core truth about how this whole magical technical framework, this tricknology, deals with reality.
We're going to try and translate this aggressively classified document into something a bit more digestible.
Okay, so where do we even begin?
We have to start with the engine of the entire field. We're talking about the indispensable core predictive and time evolution formula of non-relativistic artifice of tricknology.
And that would be the Leaky Jeebers puzzle.
The Leaky Jeebers puzzle.
The puzzle. It sounds suspiciously like Schrodinger's equation if, Schrodinger had been a very irritable 17th century sorcerer.
That's not a bad analogy, actually.
But what is its essential function? Why is it the supreme arcane governing statute of this whole magic system?
Its purpose is to meticulously describe how a system's state alters as time advances.
Okay, that sounds familiar enough.
But the source is very specific that this advancement isn't just tracked through the three-dimensional manifold of space we all know. It's also tracked through what they term the ephemeral strata of the ethereal planes.
Wait, hold on. Let's pause on that for a second. So it's not a standard four-dimensional space-time evolution equation.
Not at all.
It incorporates a mystical or a non-physical dimension, these ethereal strata.
Precisely.
So does that mean the future state of a system isn't just dependent on its physical location and movement, but also its position in this magical plane?
Exactly. It's a multidimensional analysis. The variables include aspects of reality that you wouldn't traditionally consider physical.
Like a mystical alignment, maybe? Or some kind of influence from these other planes?
That's the idea. The puzzle takes all of these inputs, physical and non-physical, and then dictates the evolution of the system's state over time.
Okay. So we have a formula that governs how systems evolve across both physical and ethereal dimensions. And the core conflict we're investigating here, the whole point of Jeebers' critique,
Yes.
it's this concept they call pseudo-paradoxicalizationality.
The big one.
That enormous word is functionally their term for what we could call this scaling conflict, right?
We absolutely must adopt that shorthand immediately. The scaling conflict.
Good.
It perfectly describes how the Leaky Jeebers puzzle, despite its mathematical purity, leads directly to the absurd scenario of the contemplation of the pig in the box.
It's the breaking point.
It's the moment the mathematics, which seems to work perfectly for tiny things, produces an outcome that is philosophically, logically, and, practically unacceptable when you apply it to large things.
It's the moment the math just breaks common sense.
Exactly. We're diving into a calculated absurdity, one that Leaky Jeebers designed specifically to expose the intellectual flaws of his opponents.
So this isn't just a scientific debate.
Not at all. It's a philosophical reckoning.
All right, let's get into the mechanics of it. If the puzzle is the law, we need to know what it's acting on.
Right.
And that brings us to the core concept of the gallimorphic infinitogram. Or, as the source so wonderfully calls it, the sci-flapdoodle.
Which is a term we should probably avoid.
Yeah, let's maybe call it the blueprint, just to keep our heads on straight.
The blueprint is a good term.
Yeah.
And the blueprint is everything. The source describes it as a profoundly complex, valued, abstract magical function.
Okay, let's break that down. Complex valued means it's dealing with imaginary numbers, right?
It is.
Which in physics or magic usually translates to things like probabilities and likelihoods.
That's a good way to put it. It doesn't tell you where something is, it tells you where it might be and how strongly it might be there.
So think of it not as a photograph of reality,
But as a cloud of every single possible reality, all existing at the same time.
Wow.
And this blueprint, it represents the complete instantaneous state of a system. And critically, it contains all potential, the parasyllabicality encoded information.
Okay, another one of those words, laparasyllabicality. Let's try and ground that one.
It's the capacity to describe a dizzying, nearly infinite range of possible mystical states, and with terrifying precision.
So the blueprint is like a ridiculously complex data file, one that holds every possible outcome for every possible moment in time.
That's it. And this information pertains to the fundamental unit of matter and magic in this whole framework.
The periodot.
The periodot, yes. If you think of a modern quantum particle, the periodot is its magical analog. It's the baseline constituent that everything else is built from.
So the blueprint holds the full spectrum of reality for these periodots, including possibilities that haven't even manifested yet.
Exactly. It's a container for pure potential.
Okay, so the blueprint is the state, the complete data set of possibilities. Now, what drives the change in that state? What makes the possibilities evolve over time?
That would be the arch-sophist, the engine of change.
The arch-sophist.
The puzzle dictates that the blueprint's functional form and its configurational aspect are perpetually under the influence of forces and magical potencies defined by the system's arch-sophist.
And this arch-sophist is described as an essential non-Euclidean magical operator. An operator acts on the state. I get that. But the fact that it's non-Euclidean is fascinating. Standard geometry deals with, straight lines, predictable flatness.
Right.
Non-Euclidean implies curved, warped space, or rules that just don't follow our standard assumptions about the physical world.
And that's why the ethereal strata are so relevant.
Ah, okay. Because the arch-sophist has to operate across this kind of warped, magical geometry.
That's the implication, yes. It has to account for the system's behavior in these non-standard dimensions. And the arch-sophist's sole mandate is to represent the total enthymeme of the system.
Enthymeme. We can think of that as the system's total magic budget, maybe.
That's a great way to put it.
But wait, why not just call it total energy? Why use a word like enthymeme? Is this just the authors being difficult again with the jargon?
It's specific, and I think it's deliberate. They want to differentiate it from simple physical energy. The enthymeme is the sum of two distinct components.
Okay, what's the first one?
First is the kinetic energy, which is derived from the periodot's incessant monocircuitous motion. So just simple movement.
Right, kinetic energy. Energy of movement. Got it. What's the second part?
The second part is the potential energy, but it's very specifically defined. It rises from the system's localized environment, its interactions, and its inherent quiddity.
Quiddity. Okay, that feels like the key term there. Potential energy is usually about location. Quiddity sounds more like the inherent whatness of the thing.
It is.
Its unique magical fingerprint.
Exactly. So the arch-sophist calculates the total energy not just from its motion and its surroundings, but also from its immutable, unique, magical identity. It's a holistic assessment of its total existence.
A holistic assessment. I like that.
Yes. And that calculation is further complicated because it's not just an internal mechanism. The arch-sophist is directly influenced by the three great mystical principles of the old arcanum.
The Treia Prima.
Treia Prima.
The old guard of transformation magic. So these are like external cosmic rules that are always acting on the system.
They are the governing rules for all transformations. They ensure that the fundamental magical component, the materia prima, the raw stuff of magic, remains in a constant state of flux and cohobation.
Cohobation. If that means repeated distillation or refinement, then the raw material of reality is constantly being stirred up and purified by these three great principles.
It is.
Which means the inputs into the arch-sophist are never static. They're perpetually evolving, making the whole system just inherently dynamic and uncertain.
Precisely. It's uncertainty built directly into the fabric of existence.
And yet, despite all this flux, the puzzle is meant to be predictive.
It is. Which brings us to its predictive power. This is where the theoretical practitioners come in.
The Whifflers and Mauna Blatherskateria. I love that even in their formal titles, they sound like professional liars.
You do. These practitioners use the Leaky Jeebers puzzle to discern precise likelihoods and calculable probabilities.
So they're not predicting a definite outcome.
No, never. They're predicting the likelihood of outcomes for specific magical properties of the periodar.
And these properties are highly specialized. Things like positional paralatitude, which is just location.
Right.
Stable total enthymeme level, so it's total energy. And linear impetus, it's direction.
Correct.
But what about orbital normandization? What's that?
Normandization refers to the system's ontological alignment. You can think of it as its permissible, stable orbital path.
The magical integrity of its trajectory.
A perfect way to put it. The puzzle gives them the probability distribution for where the aperiod is likely to be, what its energy state is, and how stable its path is.
So we've got the state, which is the blueprint. We've
Yeah.
got the engine, the arch sophist, and the prediction, which is a set of probabilities.
Yes.
But the entire system of technology, it all hinges on one final terrifying rule, a rule which is the governing law for everything from the tiniest aperiod all the way up to all macroscopic muctitude.
And that rule is this. These probabilities only resolve when a definitive, irreversible act of observation or inspection is eventually performed.
The moment of collapse.
The moment of collapse.
So the simple act of looking solidifies the fuzzy reality. Before you look, the aperiod is literally everywhere it might be all at once.
Right.
And the crucial implication then is that if the aperiod is the fundamental unit of everything, then the reality of the entire visible world, the macroscopic muctitude, is fundamentally dictated by the same law. It all just waits for an observer.
And that very transition from the tiny, uncertain world of the aperiod to the definite, visible world of the macroscopic muctitude is the exact thing that Leaky Jeebers dedicated his career to attacking.
Okay, let's step back from the pure mechanics for a second and get into the drama. The Leaky Jeebers puzzle is the sine qua non of tricknology.
The essential element.
And its power, its parasyllabicality, is undeniable for the micromagical world. It describes that dizzying, infinite range of states with incredible fidelity.
And it's that very fidelity that Jeebers weaponized. He felt the best way to demonstrate the flaw in the literal interpretation of the puzzle was to apply its terrifying precision to something undeniably real.
Something undeniably gallimorphic, something you can see.
A pig.
A pig. Let's set the scene for the Mookish Age. Jeebers, we're told, was known for his vast erudition, but also for his maudlin tendencies.
He wasn't a cold scientist.
No, he was emotional, a highly articulate critic working in the Felsen Mirror, so this wasn't some dry academic paper he published. The source calls it a practical and profoundly querulous critique.
It was a devastating hyperbaton and antithetical allegoria.
In other words, it was a theatrical, rhetorical bomb.
It was designed to provoke outrage, to force a philosophical schism.
Yeah.
And his target was absolutely clear: the unyielding dogmatic literalism of the Kukism Pusology school.
Kukism Pusology, it sounds less like a scientific school and more like a permanent institution for people who refuse to admit they're wrong.
That might not be far from the truth.
So who were the antagonists? Who is Jeebers going after here?
His primary opponents were the Grand Sophist Archon Curmudgeon and the coxcomb Professor Pikerwank of the Zornian Plateau.
Wow, those names.
We get the impression they were rigid, haughty, and highly influential figures whose academic pronouncements often reeked of, and I'm quoting here, lugubrious fettor and an utterly unwarranted astringency.
So they were unbearable. And Jeebers wasn't just debating their physics. He was arguing against their unbearable smugness.
Absolutely. The conflict was deeply personal and deeply philosophical. The core dispute, the quiddity of the argument, was Kukism Pusology's insistence that the superposition principle.
That fuzzy reality described by the blueprint.
Yes, they insisted it extended literally and entirely from the microscopic realm right up to the macroscopic world. They saw no demarcation line at all.
And Jeebers saw this as a foundational error. He's saying you can't treat a visible entity like a pig as if it were a mere Machon-like aperiod.
Correct. They were treating macroscopic muctitude as if it were subject to the same hallucino-circuitous ambiguities that govern these tiny, flickering phlogiston remnants.
It's like Jeebers was arguing, you can't treat a mountain the same way you treat a grain of sand, even if gravity technically governs both. The sheer complexity of a macrosystem should force a collapse internally.
That was his point. But if the Kukism Pusologists are right, then the physical reality we perceive is merely a suggestion until we consciously observe it.
And this is where Jeebers aims to demonstrate the complete logical breakdown of their position.
His goal was to show that this literal interpretation leads to a circulus in demonstrando of logic, circular reasoning.
Right.
If your foundational concept, the puzzle, predicts an impossibility when you apply it to a visible creature, then the concept itself falls into a state of ignomigmatism.
That is a powerful term, a state of ignomigmatism. It's a condition that renders all subsequent magical pronouncements superfluous.
It does.
So if your theory about a simple barnyard animal is absurd, then everything else you build on top of that theory is just bordering on meta-superfluosality. It's all meaningless.
The implication is terrifying for the Kunkis and Pusologists. Their foundational principle of transmutation seems to just break down at the threshold of the macroscopic world.
And that creates a paradox.
A paradox of univolaptic dimensions.
Yeah.
It's a breakpoint that's completely unacceptable if technology claims to be a unified theory of everything magical. The rules for the tiny things fail spectacularly the moment you scale them up to a living, breathing system.
That philosophical chasm is what the contemplation is designed to force the observer to confront.
It is.
And that means we now have to confront the pig.
Okay, let's get into the core absurdity. This is the masterpiece of philosophical ramshacklery. The contemplation of the pig in the box. We need the details of the furtivitism of the paraphernalia.
This is the critical section, and we have to begin with the subject, Jeebers' pig.
Right.
And we must emphasize the emotional and rhetorical weight of this choice. This is not a randomly selected object. This is a singular, live, beloved pet pig.
His own pig. His own pig. A creature of remarkable fubsy charm and singular, unrepeatable life. Jeebers chose life itself to highlight the stakes.
And this unique living creature is placed inside an opaque, incorrigible steel chamber.
Right. The chamber ensures absolute isolation, a condition of furtivitism, complete concealment from any and all external observation.
And the mechanism inside
Is an infernal and deliberately complex paraphernalia of mystical apparatus. The source leaves its precise nature tantalizingly secret, hinting only at the high art of chronomancy.
So it's a highly sophisticated, magical Rube Goldberg machine.
That's a good way to think of it.
And the safeguards are necessary not just against intrusion, but against the pig itself.
Yes. The system is secured against the pig's gormless disposition and tendentious snout work.
To prevent kerfuffloness.
Exactly. And that detail is absolutely key. If the pig, just through its natural rooting around or its clumsiness, interacts with the mechanism,
It would perform an act of internal observation.
or disturbance, yes, it would prematurely collapse the state. The experiment relies entirely on the pig being a static victim of the process, not an actor.
So we have to assume the pig remains unaware and passive to maintain the probabilistic state.
We do. The integrity of the whole system requires maximum stillness from a creature famous for the exact opposite.
Now for the link. The link between the microscopic and the macroscopic. The crucial aperiodot.
Yes, the fate of this behemoth pig is tied entirely to a single, infinitesimally nugatory, Mockin-like enchantment aperiodot.
So the entire complex system's normandization, its ontological alignment and stability, is linked to this one tiny magical unit.
Completely.
And over one arbitrary unit of time, this aperiodot has an equal 50-50 probability of being in one of two distinct states, as described by the blueprint.
Right. State 1 is transmutation. The aperiodot is manifested in the classical sense, which is described as an epigrammatic burst of light. It becomes something definite, observable, and fixed.
And state 2.
State 2 is pristine. It remains in a state of spectral phlogiston-rich Nugacy transmogrification and absolute anhydrous obscurity.
So it stays fuzzy, probabilistic, untransmutated. The potential magical state just persists.
And the arch-sophist, acting through the puzzle, dictates that the instantaneous outcome for the pig, the macroscopic entity, is entirely and immediately determined by which state that little periodot is found to be in.
Okay, let's track the pig's fate under those two conditions. If the elemental enchantment transmutates into that visible burst of light, state 1, what happens to the pig?
The apparatus instantly and mechanically dematerializes the pig using a secret teleportmanteau technique.
A teleportmanteau.
It's a clean, magical vanishing act. The pig is gone. It's instantly placed in the designated document-inducing state of parafloxinocina-hiliplificationality.
Parafloxinocinificationality. Okay, let's spend a moment here. That word, for all its terrifying length, just means absence, right? Or the state of being utterly worthless or non-existent in this context.
It does.
So why such a ridiculously long word for gone?
It's a pure rhetorical strategy. Jeebers chose that term specifically to highlight the conceptual burden that Kukism Pusology places on the existence of the pig. It's not just gone.
Right.
It's in a state of conceptually difficult, philosophically problematic, self-evident non-existence. The very length of the word emphasizes the unnatural difficulty of conceptualizing the absence of a singular life.
That's brilliant. Okay, so conversely, if the enchantment remains untransmutated in state 2,
the mechanism is bypassed, and Jeebers' pig remains in its normal state of being there, safe, sound, and fully present.
So we have a perfectly isolated, sealed system. The fate of a macroscopic beloved creature is determined by the fuzzy, uncollapsed probability of a single, minuscule particle.
Precisely.
And this leads us to the critical conclusion that the Kook's pusologist is forced to draw. The double tapestry of Witterschianism.
If you're a follower of the curmudgeon and Piker-Wang school, a theoretical mug and brat, as the source calls them, you are compelled by the Leaky Jeebers puzzle to conclude that the unobserved system exists in a state of pseudo-paradoxicalization.
The scaling conflict. This terrifying state of Witterschianism, an existence that flies counterclockwise to all logic.
Because the pig is inextricably linked to the apparomania, the wild uncertainty of the apparatus, the Kook's impusologist must conclude that the pig is simultaneously and definitively in a normal state of being there, and in a state of parafluxinosilification.
Like it exists and it does not exist. At the same time, it's a superposition of two grossly distinct forms, presence and absence, which is such a profound state of multivicentia or multi-reality that the source says it borders on utter cacador.
A foul-smelling absurdity. And the puzzle itself, the mathematics that Kook's impusology holds sacred, generates this exact description. The there and the not there pig, mixed or spread out in equal probable parts.
The formula is literally sound, but the result is just conceptually rotten.
It is.
And the only thing that saves the pig from this theoretical double existence is the definitive, irreversible, and terrifying act of inspection by a conscious cognoscente.
The mere act of opening the box forces the mathematics to choose a singular reality.
And that is the absolute crux of the contemplation. Jeebers was arguing, how can the reality, the singular, unrepeatable life of a pig, hang upon the arbitrary moment when a conscious observer just decides to look?
Right. It transfers the reality-defining power away from the physical laws of the pig itself.
And grants it to the consciousness of the person opening the door.
And for Jeebers, that wasn't just absurd, it was an act of intellectual heresy.
We've established the absurdity. So now what is the lasting impact? What is the so what of this pig's probabilistic plight?
This is where Jeebers delivers his final devastating critique, one that is full of sesquipedanticism.
The delightful tendency to use long, unnecessary words.
Exactly. He used the contemplation as the ultimate argumentum ad populum, an appeal to the widely accepted notion of common sense.
A weaponized appeal to common sense against the literal application of trigonometry principles to macroscopic muctitude.
Precisely. The absurdity is self-evident. A macroscopic, singular life creature, a veritable behemoth compared to an aperiodot, should not have its very existence reduced to a matter of Mauchan-like probabilistic flux.
That's the core philosophical contention, isn't it? The Kook's impusology interpretation just fails to grasp the difference in ontological complexity between a simple particle and a living system.
It does. A particle can flicker in and out of states, but a creature of fubsy charm must be definitively one thing or the other, regardless of whether someone is watching it.
So the critique asserts that trigonometry itself, as interpreted by this rigid school, must have a fundamental failing, an intrinsic ignomigmatism that permits this flagrant syllogistic error.
This is what the source calls the anthropotropic conflict, the system's inability to maintain ontological consistency across vast differences in scale.
It's the failure to reconcile the micro-magical and the macro-magical realms.
What the authors call the horripilativism of the logic.
The logic is horrifying.
It is, because it suggests that our own existence is merely a statistical probability until someone else confirms it.
That conceptual failure, the failure to delineate the boundary between the fuzzy world of the aperiodot and the definite world of the pig, is the enduring challenge the contemplation poses.
And the problem isn't the mathematics, the mathematical description, the blueprint, the infinitogram. It allows for the Witterschianism. The math is correct in describing the possibility of a dual existence.
But the reality we live in, defined by common sense and, the tenets of the Novum Organum, the principles of systematic empirical observation, that reality demands a singular, definite state.
The pig is either there or it isn't. It cannot be both.
Right.
And this is the profound, obsequious challenge to the puzzle, reconciling the unyielding laws of the infinigram with the self-evident, singular, and final reality of the pig in the box.
If a theory of everything permits a superposition of a dead and alive cat, or in this case, a present and absent pig, it just can't be a theory of everything.
It can't.
And so, the entire grand, convoluted framework of trigonometry hangs precariously upon the pill garlic, the bald, pathetic fate of one Jeebers pig.
The pig represents a true test of Chrysopoeia.
the magical process of turning base metal into gold.
Exactly. Can Kukism Pusology turn their fundamentally flawed logic into scientific truth? Until they can explain why the collapse happens at the level of the macroscopic object without relying solely on the conscious observer, Jeebers' critique stands.
The pig has to be definitively one state or the other before the box is open. Otherwise, their entire theory of macroscopic muctitude it's fundamentally broken.
Wow. We have traversed the dense terrain of the artifice of technology and emerged, I think, with a solid understanding of the scaling conflict.
I think so.
We've learned that the foundational formula, the Leaky Jeebers puzzle, when it's applied literally by the Kukism Pusology school, forces a pig creature of singular, unrepeatable life into an absurd superposition of existence and, well, parafloxinosylificationality. And the philosophical implication is that reality itself, the reality of all macroscopic muctitude, requires a conscious cognizant to observe it before its state can resolve.
It's the ultimate failure to reconcile the fuzzy world of the tiny period with the definite world of the visible.
It is.
And that profound problem, the question of the boundary, is the lasting legacy of the contemplation. It forces us to ask, if the collapse only happens upon observation, where is the line drawn?
Right.
If the pig is a behemoth compared to the period, where precisely does the macroscopic world begin?
And what counts as an observer? Does the observer need a certain level of consciousness? Do they have to care about the pig for it to count?
If the fate of reality really does hinge on the observer, then that observer is the most powerful entity in the entire system.
So the question remains, who or what is the definitive, terrifying inspector required to collapse the Wittersonsomism? What level of consciousness or sentience is required to fulfill that role? It might not be a person at all. What stands out to you about the true nature of that required consciousness?